The task of a historian is hard to define. Often we take on the role of educator, disseminating ideas and theories to students so that they can do the same. It's important to note, however, that these two categories do not completely overlap. A sharp, incisive historian can make a terrible teacher, and a dearly beloved, highly effectual educator may not possess the unique skills of a historian. Historians can also be writers. They spend their time streamlining their collected research into an article or sometimes an entire book. This is also, however, not completely applicable. There are some historians, like C.V. Wedgwood or George Duby, who are both formidable scholars and accomplished prose stylists, but there are countless more who may be respectable in the academic world, but cannot craft euphonious sentences or lead a popular audience through their arguments. So what really is doing history? This was a question I pondered for much of my academic career at Beloit. Some of the classes I took attempted to answer this question. My history workshop class with Professor Rob Lafleur, for example, was a solid rundown of the techniques aspiring historians should practice to improve themselves. Professor Alan Joyce's class on the medieval Mediterranean introduced me to the field of public history through the lens of Wikipedia editing. These were valuable lessons, but they didn't really illuminate the details of the daily life of a historian. It seemed to me that it was a polymorphous field, which could adapt to the interests and abilities of the individual scholar. I still felt, however, that there was some ding an sich of being a historian which was intangible. The closest I feel I've come to that quintessence was during my time as an intern for the Winnetka Historical Society during the summer of 2019. Winnetka is a quiet, upscale suburb of Chicago, located near the banks of Lake Michigan. Its most notable landmark is New Trier High School, the alma mater of many local celebrities and the partial inspiration for the mid-1980s suburban high schools depicted in the films of John Hughes. Often, while taking the bus into or out of town, gazing at its emerald lawns and classy bungalows, I felt I was passing through the climactic chase scene in Hughes' 1986 film Ferris Bueller's Day Off, half expecting to see the eponymous protagonist dashing over chain-link fences and giving me a devilish grin. The Historical Society itself was located in a beautiful 19th century house full of light and dust. The first floor had been partially converted into a small museum. The exhibit during the summer I worked there concerned the effect the Great War had on the people of the town, the First World War. The basement was where the archives were stored. Stainless steel shelves carrying sturdy plastic boxes of documents and artifacts lined the walls. I worked mostly upstairs in the house, in what was once one of the bedrooms. My supervisor was Rachel Ramirez, the museum curator. She tasked me with cataloging the contents of a specific collection, the life's work of John Nash Ott, a banker and amateur filmmaker. This project was perfect for me at that point in my life. I was obsessed with film. Anytime I wasn't watching movies, I was reading everything I could find about them. I was immediately intrigued by the project Rachel had given me, not just because the central figure was a filmmaker, but also because he was an amateur. Ott was born in the Chicago area in 1909, and by the time he was in high school, he was interested in making movies. He was specifically interested in time-lapse photography, a technique whereby an imperceptibly slow process like growth or decay could be captured on film. He made his first films with a Brownie disposable camera, taking a picture of his subjects, usually plants, every hour, but was unsatisfied with the results. He went to college and then Harvard Business School, and then on to a successful career in finance, which bought him his elegant Winnetka home and gave him more resources for his hobby. In 1937, he developed the first model of an automated camera rig, which would take pictures of his subjects at shorter intervals, making for astonishingly smooth time-lapse films of flowers growing, fruit rotting, and other natural phenomena. His passion both for plants and photography caught the attention of a local TV station, who gave him his own show, where he gave gardening tips and presented his time-lapse films to the public. This in turn attracted the Walt Disney Company, who contracted him to make several clips for their educational film, Secrets of Life. My task was to watch his films and log them into a database. On the program Past Perfect, I would record their title, how long they were, and what format they were recorded on, and write a short summary of their content. The first few films I watched were posted on the Society's YouTube channel and represented his chef d'oeuvre. It was truly astonishing work. With rudimentary technology in the basement of his house, Ott was able to give animation to seemingly stationary objects. Flowers grew from shoots and bloomed into vibrant color. Fruit and vegetables seemed to drip from their vines like droplets of water running down a leaf. Plants growing at high speed seemed to thrash in verdant ecstasy, reaching their climax in stasis with the unfolding of petals or the ripening of fruit. It was prudent that Ott accompanied this incredible footage with lobotomized light classical music, because otherwise it might have taken on a Georgia O'Keeffe-style botanic eroticism. As I moved deeper into his archives, however, I discovered a strange side story to his life as a hobbyist. While examining his plants in his basement studio, Ott discovered that different colored lights seemed to affect their growth in different ways. In particular, he believed that full-spectrum lighting, containing both infrared and ultraviolet frequencies, had a phenomenal positive impact on their health and vitality. Ott was not a scientist or a doctor, but he felt so strongly that he had witnessed something remarkable which he believed could help humanity, that he began an eccentric, lifelong crusade to promote the benefits of this specific type of lighting. The last 40 or so years of his career as a filmmaker were devoted to a cinematic treatise on the power of full-spectrum lighting called Exploring the Spectrum. I watched clips of him explaining his ideas and testing them out on plants and his young sons, which were later used in the film and a 1980s infomercial for a brand of glasses he developed based on his philosophies. His quixotic mission never took on the romantic but tragic qualities of one of Werner Herzog's foolish dreamers, but it was poignant just the same to see how passionate he was about his ideas, no matter how dubious the science supporting them was. The task of watching and cataloging the Ott films took up one half of the summer, and the other was devoted to two projects: properly filing and storing the actual film negatives of his work, and revising his Wikipedia page. The first project in particular made me feel especially close to the essence of history as a task. The content of the films were being preserved for posterity, but the films themselves were also artifacts of a relatively recent but vastly different stage in the history of information. The stock was often decaying, giving off a smell of sulfur, and sometimes was warped or damaged by water. When I unspooled it to attach white strips of leader, fragile pieces of blank stock at the start of the reel would snap into small flakes of transparent material, which looked like the leftovers of Japanese tempura or the wings of insects. Unlike today, where every file has a backup for its backup, these were often the only copies of the films and had to be handled with the utmost care and respect. It really gave me a first-hand experience with the material history of film as a medium, the rooms full of machines and tables full of objects needed to record and play back just a few minutes of footage, and how all of those things were now essentially useless when recording video takes just one finger tap on a phone screen. The duties I was expected to perform at the Winnetka Historical Society were simple and sometimes mindless, but they amounted to much more than the sum of their parts. John Nash Ott was a minor figure in the history of film and the history of the village of Winnetka, but he still had a legacy that deserved to be maintained for posterity. He had a unique talent for staging and composing his time-lapse films, which are significant as a record of a period of time in the village and in the history of amateur photography. I was not really researching or compiling information, except at the end of the summer when I worked on the Wikipedia article, which before my intervention read as a thinly veiled advertisement for Ott's light products, his sunglasses and lights that you could attach to things in your house. Like, it was very much an advertisement. And instead making sure that future researchers could use Ott's films as primary sources in their work, and that his films were in the historical record where they could gain a new audience. I came in close contact with a small piece of history, and was deeply enriched by the experience. This, I think, is a major part of the task of a true historian, not just writing, teaching, and collating research, but directly engaging with the past, the material reality of the past, and gaining new understanding from it. Thanks. Hope this is sufficient. All right. That's it.